This is Dan Jurgens, and if you want to have a good time, keep listening to the Krypton Report.
Jason J. Lewis, the voice of Superman on Justice League Action, and you're listening to the Krypton Report.
Look up in the sky, the birds, the planes.
The following interview is an awesome, fun interview. We did have some technical problems, so if the sound's a little wonky, I've done things to fix it. I do apologize, but enjoy.
Welcome to the Krypton Report podcast. I'm your host, Tyler, the Superman of Blue, and with me as my sidekick today is not Mr. Cole, it's Solomon.
Yeah, it is me.
And today we have a special guest. If you have seen our post online, my wife, my mother-in-law, and I will be directing a version of It's a Bird, It's a Plane, It's Superman for our local community theater. It's kind of been a dream of mine to do for a while. As a lot of listeners know about the tragedy that befell our family last year with my sister-in-law, who was very, very active in theater and is what got Solomon into theater. I felt like now is the best time to just go ahead and not hold back. So when I'm thinking of staging Superman, I took a long shot and I reached out to a man I wasn't sure if I get to talk to, but I have with us today Mr. David Patrick Wilson, who played the part of Superman on the ABC Superman musical. Mr. Wilson, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you very much.
I'm glad you're
I'm
here.
going to help you out with a little bit of better light here. Hold on.
You're okay.
A little more light on the subject from this side. All right. Okay. There we go.
It's kind of crazy to think. So my wife and I, we watched the TV musical the other night as part of our prep, because there's no recording of, like, Bob Holliday's stage performance.
No, there isn't.
And so we were just kind of watching it and talking about that as we, approach our set design and everything for it. But before we get into all those details, I just want to say I think it's, you and Bob Holliday are kind of, and even Kirk Alyn to some extent, kind of forgotten Superman, because you did play the role.
We are definitely the forgotten Superman.
And it's not like, with Johnny Rockwell, who played Superboy for a pilot that never aired.
Right.
Your special did air, and we'll talk a little bit about how it's been very hard to come by. I mean, it is on YouTube right now.
Right.
But let's start with you, sir. When did you get into acting? How did that come about?
Well, I was at Columbia University, and I was on my way to becoming a lawyer to go to work for my stepfather and his corporation. And I was on a free ride to Columbia, and I dropped out. I just decided I didn't want to be in college, and it was a very difficult time. It was right at the height of the Vietnam War. Was not a very popular, especially around my family's household. It was not a popular decision, I got to tell you. And I had done in high school, the only production, I had done a couple of little productions in high school, but my high school musical was South Pacific, and I starred in it with Patti LuPone, who of course is a Broadway legend now, but back then she was just Patty from the block, and I really enjoyed it, but I really hadn't contemplated being an actor at that point. But when I left Columbia, I didn't really know what I was going to do, and one day, actually, I left as a result of the draft lottery, in which my birth date came up 365 out of 366.
Wow.
So I was not going anywhere, but even prior to that, my brother was already in the military at that point, and so I probably wouldn't have had to go in any event. So I just decided, I looked at the elements, I said, this is lining up like I'm going to not have to do this, so I'm going to do what I want to do. But I didn't know what I wanted to do. So one day I went into New York City, down in Times Square. At that time was the Allied Chemical Building. It was before the New York Times bought the building right there on the Times Square. That's where they dropped the ball on New Year's.
Mm-hmm.
And they had an information booth there with rows and rows of phone books. right?
Mm-hmm.
And I went in and I opened the yellow pages and I started flipping through the yellow pages to see the possibility. And I went all the way through the book once. And then I started back through it and I got to acting and I said, you know what? I've done this. I like this. I'm going to try this. So I tore the page with the acting schools on the page out of it. And I, one by one, I hit them all on that same day. You know, I got in there very early in the morning, so I'm going to one to another. You know, the American Academy, the Strasberg Actor Studio. I mean, there was Juilliard. The last place that I found was a building on 54th Street with a red door called the Neighborhood Playhouse School of the Theater, and I walked and I went in. I went to that place, and by that time I was so exasperated. I was going to go.
Yeah.
And I walked in, and poor woman sitting downstairs at the front desk said, "Yes, can I help you?" I said, "Is this an acting school?" She said, "Yes." I said, "Where's the office?" She said, "On the second floor." But before she could say anything else, I was on the second floor. And I walked in, and there was another woman who was stacking applications, and she said, "Yes, can I help you?" I said, "Yeah, this is an acting school, right?" She said, "Yes." I said, "Well, how do I get in?" She said, "Well, you got to fill out an application." I said, "Okay, great." And then you'll have a meeting, and you'll be informed about a meeting, and then they'll make a decision, and that'll be how you get in. Well, I filled out the application. I said, handed it to her. I said, so when do I, when can I get in? And she laughed. She said, "Well, we've had 5,000 applications, so maybe 2.5 years." And at that moment, a little man stepped up next to me, and he said, "Excuse me." A little guy from Brooklyn. And I said, "Excuse me." He said, No, excuse me." I said, No, excuse me. And the woman behind the desk, right behind the table, her eyes were getting like saucers, man. She was bulging out of her head. And she said, "Mr. Meisner, this is David Wilson." I said, "Oh, he is he?" He said, "Yes, I is, aren't I?" He said, "Don't do that." I said, "Don't do what?" "Don't do that." "Don't do that." He said, "Yeah, that." He says he wants to be an actor. I said he probably have to wait. And this little man was so irritated with me. He said, "Come here." And he walks me around the corner to his office. He said, "Sit down." I sat down, and he says, "Who sent you?" I said, "Who sent me? Nobody sent me." He said, "I told you not to do that." I said, "Not to do what?" I didn't realize at the time that what I was doing, I was repeating him constantly, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which was the foundation and the very basis of all of his acting teaching. That was the first lesson, and I knew nothing about it or nothing about him.
Interesting.
He said, "Nobody sent you." I said, "No, nobody sent me." "What are you doing here?" He said, "Well, I thought I'd like to try and, maybe be an actor." And he said, "Well, how'd you find out about us?" And I pulled the Yellow Pages page out of my pocket, I unfolded it, put it on his desk, and he said, "You found out about me in the Yellow Pages?" I said, "Yeah." He said, and then he took a long look at me, and he said, "You got 20 years?" I said, "I got the rest of my life." He said, I didn't even hesitate, right?
Mm-hmm.
He said, "Okay, you can start here." And just like that, I was in.
That's awesome.
He was doing it. It was right before, they were doing their end of the year productions. It was right before the summer, and he was about to do the first summer session that he had done in 20 years.
Oh wow!
And he put me in that class, and eventually he took me into the main school, and I studied for 2 years, and it was one of the greatest experiences of my life, and that's where it all started. Kind of a long story to get there, but I think it's just such an incredible thing because it was such totally by happenstance.
Now, did you have any singing experience or anything like that, or just
did I have any what
singing experience?
Oh well, yeah. I mean, I've been a singer all my life. I started singing when I was 6 years old. And the first thing I did was I did a weather show at the Gatelot Avenue Elementary School. I think I was 7 or 8, and I sang before the entire assembled PTA somewhere over the rainbow in my hearty soprano voice at that time. Nice. And that was the first performance I did. But I had been singing, pretty much most of my life, but I'd never really had any formal training. Mm-hmm. And I didn't really start singing for earnest until we did that production in high school. I mean, I wasn't in the chorus. I wasn't part of the choir. And much to the chagrin of the choral director, she said, "Where have you been?" And, so I will eventually, out of doing Superman, Leslie Ann Warren took me to see a man named Seth Riggs, who trained Michael Jackson, Janet Jackson, Mariah Carey, all of that. And I started working with Seth, and he got me my first record deal. And I mean, it was all I've been singing ever since, and I actually teach singing now. So
that's awesome, because when my wife and I had watched the musical before. And then, and it was kind of like I just had it on the background because I was just like, okay, what are some Superman-based things that I had not experienced? But when her and I were watching the other night, I was watching more intently. And when you start singing, my wife is a singer as well. Like she's trained, and everything in school. And we were listening. I was like, wow, like your voice is really, really good in it. Like, not that I didn't think it wasn't, but I was like, it's like it was better than what I thought. I know that sounds weird, but like you know how like sometimes you see people and you're like you have an idea of what their voice might sound like, but when you were singing, I was like, wow. I was like, that is, it's really good. So I was.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
We were both like moved, like, man, that's strong. And the thing is, like,
I love singing. I really love singing.
So we'll kind of jump ahead a little bit and. We'll touch here. Were you a Superman fan before getting this part?
Oh, sure, man. I used to watch the, George Reed every week, the original TV series, and before that, I think I had seen the first, the Kurt Allen thing, before that. But I mean, I was always a Superman fan, and we moved upstate New York. I mean, we had a summer place, and in the summer there wasn't anything to do. There was no TV up there. There was not. So all I do would be read Superman comics. I mean, I read them all. So it was like that was it. And so for me to land that part when Norman Twain was casting it was like a real big deal.
I just want for the audience to realize that The Adventures of Superman ended in 1958.
That's true.
The animated Superman series ran from 66 to 70. Then we had the Super Friends from 73 to 85. The Broadway was in the year 66.
Right.
And then David comes along, Mr. Wilson here, and in 75 and does the TV special. There had not been a live-action Superman presence for 17 years.
That's it.
So just to put that in some context for everybody, you're the history.
And you gotta realize too, Jonathan, that was 50 years ago.
I know. I was thinking about that.
50 years ago, man. I can't believe it myself. I mean, I've stayed in pretty good shape. As a matter of fact, I weigh almost exactly now what I did when I did the role. But and the proportions are kind of moved a little bit, but the fact of the matter is, it's 50 years, man. To me, it's unfathomable that it's been that long.
I mean, it is crazy. Like just time. I mean, Solomon just turned 10 this year, and it just seems like he was just born. And,
I'm telling you, Solomon, you better it's a fast ride, pal. My advice to you is do what you like in life. You got to find what you want to do and just enjoy it.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what, if you're not having fun, it's no good. Don't do it.
See?
That doesn't mean things can't be difficult, because things do get difficult,
Yeah.
Yep. We lost him for a second. Technical problem.
that that you're doing the thing that calls you to do it.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I've always done. I know I look a little bit different now than my Clark Kent Superman days.
Your voice is still
But
powerful.
but the fact of the matter is, the reason I look like this is because I'm working on a play that I wrote. Okay, it's called E equals Me Too, right? And I don't know if this looks familiar to you, if you know anything about Albert Einstein.
I mean, you look good. You look like Einstein.
That's
You know
was
who
kind
Einstein
of
is,
why
right?
I chose to do it.
Yeah. Like, yeah. As soon as you release the hair, like, yeah. Yeah, you look good.
And that's because, I called it E equals Me Too, because that equation that they got they think that I wrote, they just misread my handwriting. My E looked like a C, and the 2 that I wrote, they thought was an exponential number. I just wrote E equals Me Too. Everything equals Me Too.
Nice. That's nice.
Anyway, that's it's been a lot of fun. I'm having a lot of fun working on that. We're doing a performance of that in March.
Cool.
So I'm working on that thing too.
That's awesome. And the thing is, your voice still sounds as powerful and prominent. Like, if I were to just, like, when you called and I was listening to your voicemail, I was like, his voice still sounds like a powerful young man. Having a knowledge base of that you're an older man, I was like, dang, he's kept up with it. Like, it still sounded recognizable.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, I still feel, I don't even know how I got here.
Yeah.
To be this age, it just showed up all of a sudden, and I don't feel, to tell you the truth, I feel very little difference between now and what I did, the way that I did when I did that show. It's really kind of amazing to me that I'm at this stage in life, and I'm still performing. I'm actually doing a show called Once More. Frankly, Frank Sinatra. I knew Sinatra. Sinatra was a friend of mine.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, I met him right about that time. As a matter of fact, 70. I think I met him in 76. And that's quite a story too.
Yeah.
I met him at the Beverly Hilton Hotel in Trader Vic's restaurant on Father's Day, 1976. And he was there. He was on his first date with Barbara Marx.
Wow.
And I met him and spent some time with him, and I just loved the guy. He was just one of the best. And was a really, really good man, a fun guy, and a very concerned. He was he was a very personable guy. The first time I saw him, he came down the stairs. He and Jilly Rizzo and his wife. He was with Barbara Marx, and then Billy Wilder and his wife were with them. And Billy Wilder was, the director of Some Like It Hot.
Yeah.
Right. They come down the stairs. They had been at this function upstairs, and there were only in the entire restaurant, there was just the group that I was with, 4 people, and his group. And when he came down the stairs, my writing partner says, "Oh, that's Frank Sinatra." I said, "Yeah, you want to meet him?" Because I had just signed with the label, right? That there were only 3 artists on the label. It was me, Nancy Sinatra, and Frankie Valli.
Wow.
Frankie Valli had the hit record with them, Swear to God, right? And I said, "You want to meet him?" He said, No, don't go over here. He'll punch you out. I said, "Nonsense. He won't do anything of the sort." So I was having a drink there. They had these big drinks, right? And floating in the drink was this gardenia. It was a mimosa, right? That was the name of the drink. I scooped out the gardenia, I shook it off. I walked over, I handed it to him. I tapped him on the shoulder. I said, "Mr. Sinatra, I don't mean any disrespect, and I certainly don't want to take you away from your company. But you're a father, and I know your kids aren't with you, and I'm a father, and my kids aren't with me on Father's Day. So happy Father's Day." And he looked at me, and then he looked at his friends. He said, "Excuse me, I got to go say hello to some of my friends over here." He came over, sat down for like 20 minutes. And we just talked, man. He's just talking about the record business. And, you know, he was great. He invited us down he was playing at Caesar's Palace the next week and invited us down there. He was a peach. I just love the guy.
That's awesome. That's the stories that you take in and you hear, and you're just like, wow.
Yeah, things like that happen, man. You know,
things
that they happen to me is I you know, to me it's like totally inconceivable, but they did. I'll tell you what, you know, about your production that we did for ABC. That was a very minimal production. I mean, those were painted backdrops, right? They were flats, right? Mm-hmm. The sets were minimal.
That's what I found interesting was, so in Solomon's Nursery, I don't have a picture right here to show you. My wife could wear the two walls where he put his crib. She did like a Metropolis sky, and there's the Daily Planet, and then she did like a Gotham skylight with the bat signal. You know, she drew it by hand, and the sets you guys had reminded me of that minimalist, which I think worked, except for there's a couple of shots where some of the like Max Menken stuff, their costuming, the colorization blended in with the colorization of the set walls.
The chroma key?
Yeah, like, so like you come in, like the room is white, you're wearing blue, like Leslie's in pink at one time, she's in green as Lois, and it works, but then you had like Max come in and he's in gray and the walls are gray, and it's like he almost disappears into the set.
Oh no, that's kind of funny.
It is.
Well, you know, there's a funny thing about that. I'm the reason why there is green screen to begin with. Originally,
listen to this.
Background screening like that was blue screen, right? It was called chroma blue.
Listen to this, Solomon. This is cool.
And my eyes, right? We shot this scene where I'm flying. You know, that's the flying stuff, right? And we did a whole day of that. They had me on wires, and they're swinging me across the stage and flinging me across the stage, and I'm flying, and they rolled me on a tabletop. I actually had to arch my back, right, and while I'm on this table, and you can't see that there's any flat space really there. That's just you know me, but I'm on a table, and the table was painted blue, and they slid the thing across and I'm flying. Well, the problem was when they went to dailies, you know, that's every day they would look at the film that they shot. When they went to dailies, my eyes were the same color as the chroma, so it looked like I had holes in my head.
Because
so we had to go back and do the whole thing over with green screen. The next day, the entire stage was green, right? And the table that I was on was green. That's because of me.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
It looked like I had two holes in my head flying.
So we've played around with green screen stuff. In our old house in the basement, I bought a bunch of like that poster board, and I made like the wall all as one giant green screen, and I had stuff for the kids to play in, and we'd play with pictures. And we still do, but like I had them like one where I have Solomon like holding a green soccer ball, so that you know we took out wherever he was holding the ball, you know, it made it neat. So like we've played around with that concept.
Like we made Sayla look like Supergirl.
Yeah, we made Sayla, my daughter, look like Supergirl.
So Wolfman thing.
What we'll do here in just a minute, we'll get into, because I want to get into how, you know, the casting process and how it came to be. Because one thing that's sad is there's never been, as much of my research I was doing, like an official release of this.
No.
And it, you know, it's weird because sometimes it's labeled as It's a Bird, It's a Plane, It's Superman, and sometimes it's labeled as the Superman musical because some characters were added, some characters were taken out. It's not a one-to-one translation of the stage production to TV.
Right.
And, you know, some songs were added and taken out. So it's very interesting, but there's never been an official release.
That's true.
You know, it was released on ABC. It aired one time, if I'm not mistaken.
The Wide World of Entertainment.
And it was something I discovered that it existed in 2006 when I was watching the documentary that had come out about Superman with the Superman Returns release. which is one of my favorite documentaries, period. It's a really just well done documentary, and that's when I learned that this existed. And it's just crazy because it's such a unique artifact to the Superman mythos.
It really is.
That
It
gets
is. It,
lost.
And I, at the time, I mean, I and all of my friends and colleagues thought it was a pretty hokey deal. but it turns in terms of, hold on a second. I'm just trying to.
Oh, you're fine.
Readjust I got to put this in a holder now. Okay, so while I redo my hair here, it's such a kitsch piece, I mean, it's so there's nothing like it, in the Superman universe. An interesting fact about that thing was, I was good friends with Chris Reeve. We actually started our careers together in a movie called Grey Lady Down with Charlton Heston.
Wow.
At Universal that was produced by Daryl Zanuck, right? And the Mirisch brothers, Paul and Walter Mirisch, who did the Pink Panther film.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Yeah, the old ones
but,
with was it David Niven, right?
So
yeah,
it was just such a very different kind of an experience, and we shot it at the Selznick Studios, which is now Sony Studios, and which was originally where they did the original production of Gone with the Wind.
Oh wow!
The office building itself was Tara.
Okay,
that was their offices, and the sound stages were behind it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And my first dressing room was Clark Gable's dressing room in Gone with the Wind.
That's exciting.
And so, but Chris, right? Chris had seen the Superman that I did, and a bunch of the bits that he did, if you take a close look at it in the film,
mm-hmm.
he took a bunch of stuff from me. We were both up for that role too. So we were both up for the role, but Dick didn't want anybody that had ever done the role before, right?
Okay, which makes sense.
So
I mean, it makes sense.
He decided he wanted to find somebody new. Chris at that time was like a rail. I mean, he was 6'4", and he weighed about 175 pounds. I mean, he was a bone. And I was totally amazed when it came out. He put on 50 pounds of muscle to be able to do that role. I don't know how he did it.
It's crazy. I just recently watched the documentary that just came out about him, which was really good. If you haven't seen it, the Superman story, Chris Reeve story.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's so interesting because you talk about how you had went for the role. Like, I don't know if you know this much in like Superman history, but Gerard Christopher, who had played Superboy, was going to be picked to be Superman for Lois and Clark on TV. But when they found out he had played Superboy, he was not considered. They tossed him out and went with Dean Cain. So
that's Hollywood. That's that's how everybody wants to be, the next great discoverer. So I have no idea.
Now tell us.
That's why I don't live in Hollywood anymore. I'm an artifact now. So.
Yeah, we're both on the East Coast for our listeners, and at this time of the recording, we're going through a huge polar vortex, deep cold.
Cold.
It is cold. It is cold.
So tell us,
the temperature downstairs right now is about 5.
Yeah,
4 or 5.
Where are we? Let's look. Take us through, like, when you got how far into it's 6 here. Feels like -1. Take us through the process when you joined the production. How far were they into it? Where you were?
By the time I was called into the offices of I guess it was Norman Twain's office, who was the producer. Norman was a real character, and I did the reading in an office, and then they wanted to see me. The first auditions were on stage.
Okay.
So they were doing it in a theater, right, where I sang and I did a reading, and then I had to go to the offices and meet the executives. And I don't know who else was in the mix at that time. I really didn't care. And then I guess the last consideration was whether or not I could pull off the role physically, right? So I recall them at one point, they said, "Can you take off your shirt?" I said, "Yeah, okay, fine." And I mean, I was in pretty good shape at the time, so I didn't have any problem taking the shirt off. And they said, "Oh yeah, okay, let's do it." And that was it, you know.
Well, it's interesting. When I was watching it, I realized I really like your Clark. Like, I really like what you were doing with Clark. Like, the only thing that I nitpicked, and I told my wife, was just, I've never been a fan of, like, putting Clark Kent in a blue suit with a red tie.
Yeah.
Like, I understand in the comics because you're only printing so many colors.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. But I was like, just your performance as Clark, I actually really like. And I was like, I like what he's doing, the way you did your voice, the way you carried and stuff. And like, and then when you come out of Superman, of course, you adjust your voice and and you did well. And the one thing about your performance as Superman, or not your performance, like the musical in any form, there is not as much Superman in it as you would think. And that's what's crazy. He's the main character.
Yeah.
Like, is about him, but he is not in it as much in either form as Superman or Clark. It's an interesting thing. Had you ever seen or heard any of the Bob Holliday production?
No, I did not. As a matter of fact, as you said, that was back in '66, and I never got a chance to see that. So I really didn't know. I was kind of operating in the blind there.
I think it can help, so that you don't try to do what somebody else has done.
Well, I've always believed that even if you're repeating or reprising somebody else's role, that that it's really kind of detrimental to allow yourself to be affected by the other person's performance like that. Although, like I said, I mean, I'm sure I would have snatched a couple of things too, but it was really funny with Chris because a couple of years we were good friends, and I mean that was such a tragic loss for everybody. He was such a good person, and he had gone to Yale, I think, is where he went to Yale drama, and I just he said I ran into we lived in the same neighborhood in Manhattan up on the West Side when he was married to Gay Exton, I think.
Yeah.
And he said, "David, I got to tell you," he said, "I used a bunch of your stuff." I said, "No kidding." He said, like I hadn't seen it, right? Yeah. Like the whole thing with the typewriter, the tie and the typewriter and all of that stuff. That that was business that I created there, and there was a couple of other things there too, like the whole thing, the fetal position thing, and when he finds out that he's not everything that he thinks he is.
Yeah.
And so it was really fun to do that show, though. I loved working with the people. Loretta Swit. I'm
a big MASH fan. Like seeing her every year, like I watch the MASH Christmas episodes because I think they're some of the best Christmas episodes and everything. Yeah, so like seeing her as part of it was really exciting.
Yeah, I mean, I was playing it with Cinderella. I mean that she was always going to be Cinderella. Leslie Ann was Cinderella to me. So to be able to play with her was a lot of fun, and we had we carried on for a while after that. But also Ken Mars, David Wayne. I mean, I love these guys. It was just so much fun to be able to be in that space doing that stuff with them.
Did you want to say something? Yeah, go ahead, ask him.
And I enjoyed doing what choreography there was there too. Actually, when I came out of the Playhouse, the first professional job that I got was as a dancer. My dance teacher, who had danced with Martha Graham,
Mm-hmm.
came to me. He says, "I got you a job." And when I graduated, he said, "You got? What do you mean you got me a job?" Yeah, go. I want you to go see Bertrand Ross over at Martha Graham, and they're going to take you into the company. And they did, and I was there for 3 weeks, and then I got my first role in a movie with Robert Mitchum.
Wow.
Called Going Home. Jan Michael Vincent's first film.
Now, the one that I saw on your resume that got me excited, I haven't watched it in years, but I saw that you were in it, was Eddie and the Cruisers.
Oh, yeah, man. I played Kenny Hopkins, the drummer in the band.
I really did. It was one of those, I used to work at Blockbuster, and I was just going through the movies, and I was like, I want something I haven't seen. I found this, and I read the back, and I was like, oh, this sounds cool. So I took it home, and I watched it. I really enjoyed that movie. Like,
yeah,
I thought it was
a lot of people did. That's like a cult classic now.
It is. It's one that I just think that's like, I don't. There's something about that movie I just really enjoyed. My all-time favorite movie. Okay, if people don't know this, my all-time favorite movie is That Thing You Do.
Oh yeah.
Written, directed by Tom Hanks.
Tom Hanks, I love that, man. I love that film.
I love that movie. I love playing music and everything. So like I used to play in bands. So I always loved movies about bands. So when I discovered Eddie and the Cruisers, I was like, oh, this is cool. This is right up my alley. So when I was looking through your IMDb and everything, because I was like, what else have I seen besides Superman? And I was like, oh, that's awesome. Solomon, you had a question?
Yeah, I did.
Go ahead, ask him.
When you're saying like about like follow like your hopes and
Talk louder, buddy.
like follow your hopes and like when you were talking to me about this stuff, actually I started out with soccer, playing a sport. And
athletics is a great place to come from.
But he found he really likes acting better.
Yeah, because
I
felt like I wasn't a sports guy actually.
Yeah, he wasn't a sports guy, and watching him perform, stepping back is taking my dad hat off and just putting on like my director and hat and everything. He is excelled and has come a long way. Like we just did a play together. Actually, the whole family was in for Christmas, and my favorite parts was watching his scenes before we came out because he did very well. Just there's a confidence and everything that came up, and with him.
Oh, listen, there's no greater business in the world. I mean, there's no, to me, it's Meisner used to say all the time, I don't know why I'm teaching you. There's no work out there. But the fact of the matter is, I had all of my union cards, SAG, AFTRA, and AEA. SAG and AFTRA were two separate unions at that time, within the first three weeks out of school. And I had my first film with Mitchum. I had a play, starring part in a play in Chicago, a brand new play that it ran for a year. I did 400 consecutive sold out performances, right? So, I mean, he said there was no work. Well, there was work. And in fact, now the industry is 100 times larger than it was then.
Oh yeah, I believe it.
100 times, not 100% bigger, 100 times bigger. So there's lots of stuff out there to do. There's it's a great, industry to be in. You just have to keep your eyes open. You have to do the right thing, maintain your integrity, stay honest, and you can't miss. There's so many good people in the business.
I'd like
There are a lot of bad people too, just like there's bad people everywhere. There are bad. You have to keep your eyes open and stay on your guard. And don't give yourself up to temptation, boy, because there's a lot of temptations out there.
I read this book last year, The Voices from Krypton, and I reread the passage interview that you gave, and I marked it because I really like the quote that you have in here. I'm gonna read it real quick. You stated, having played the part of Superman, I don't think it ever leaves you. That's a real effect of the character on the artist. It's like people that play Jesus. They have a tough time afterwards in any choices they make. I think any of the superhero roles affect you in that way. All of a sudden, you're taking a look at the choices you're making, there's got to be something in there that calls to doing those characters, number one. And one of the things I think is building the strength of character to make positive choices rather than negative.
That's correct.
And
I said that, huh?
yeah. Yeah. And I just wanted to ask, like, having played this character,
Uh-huh.
has it ever, do you ever get recognition or anyone remember it? Or is it something that, you kind of have that's kind of yours in the background and it's just one of those things on your resume? Do you ever feel like, hey, I got to contribute to the legacy of this? Or
Oh, well, I mean, that's something that I feel, I mean, there's a picture that I have in my collection of all of the Supermans, starting with Kirk, Alan, and George and Bob, and then me, and then the rest of the Supermans that follow, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's a whole arc of them into the sky, right? It's like a rainbow of Supermen, And the legacy is you have a very different take on truth and integrity once you've played a part like that. As I said, like playing Jesus Christ, when you played a role that's steeped in that kind of honest, truthful tradition, that never leaves you.
Yeah.
And it always calls you to be something more than or better than what you've been before. And that's the best part of this business, is you can always be better than you were before. And the other thing I'm going to say is, I've never ever in my life ever felt that I was in competition with anyone else in this business. I mean, obviously there are parts that somebody else was given, and there were parts and I've got lots of horror stories around that stuff.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is, you can't be in competition with anybody. The only competition you have is being better than you were the last time that you did it. Going out there and being more concentrated, being more focused, being more willing to give yourself over to the playing of the part. That's the only competition you have, and there's room for everybody to play in that field.
What advice, as I go into here in the next couple of months and begin my casting for my production, what advice do you have for the actor playing Superman in the musical?
The advice for the actor playing Superman: he's got to believe in the values and in himself, in the values of the character and in themselves. You got to really listen closely and pay very close attention to how they deal with everyone and how they deal with the character. That's really important. I think that that you'll find that in going forward.
Yeah.
And that there are a lot of people out there that have those qualities. But those are the ones you want to focus on: honesty, integrity, and presence. They've got to be present to everything that's there. Because that's one of the things that I liked about doing the character, was there isn't anything that he missed.
Yeah.
So, he had super hearing, he had supervision, he had all kinds of super stuff, right? But even with that, he wasn't perfect. And I think that's the other thing, that even though you have all those characteristics, there is a vulnerability about the character. And that vulnerability usually shows up in the human part of being the character.
What I think is interesting, just taking it back, is with your character, the timing, because this is 75. We'll get, in a couple of years, we get the Donner film, which revolutionizes the character.
Right.
So it really is interesting when you look back at where the character was, both in comics and pop culture, when you put on the cape,
Yep.
And I think your interpretation has a lot of validity in where the character was, where the comics were. And I think it just kind of gets looked at, one, because it's not as accessible. I mean, even though it is on YouTube, like I said, for everybody to go and check out. I just think that there's still a lot of good in there. I always look for the positive in anything. And I think there was fun. My wife and I really enjoyed watching it the other night. Because she had never actually seen it. She had seen images and stuff and little clips from it. She's going to be the musical director for the musical as we produce it and everything. So we were, like I said, taking notes. And have you ever been to Metropolis to the Superman celebration or anything?
No, I have not. And you know that's one thing that I'd really like to do. I have not, and I should probably look into doing that.
I think it would be neat for you. It was the other night. I was like, you know what? I'm gonna see if I can find him online. I'm gonna reach out, see what happens. It won't hurt to try because I think it'd be very fun to talk with him as we go on this journey. And then when you called me, I was shocked. I was like, wow, it worked. I get to chat with Superman. So Mr. Wilson, I thank you for your time. I know we could chat a lot longer, but I want to respect your time as we prepare for the weather and everything today.
Well, listen, I wish you all the best. You know, go out there and go and get them, you know. And remember, you know, all you got to do is get up and away. You know, that's what you're getting. Once you start, it'll kind of lead you where you need to go. But I commend you for taking on the task, and I'll be very interested to hear your outcome.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, God bless you all. You have a great night.
Okay.
You know, and have a great production. Solomon, real pleasure, man. Go out there and get them, buddy.
Hello.
I am Brian Peters, the creator and host of Gravely Amusing. For the past 30 years, I've studied the history of gods and monsters in pop culture and our world. As a student of theology and history, I've tried to understand evil and its impact on us. As a writer, I've tried to share this knowledge. As a comedian, I've tried to make people laugh as I do it. But as a man-child, I'm still that scared 7-year-old boy. Join me as I share the history of horror and sci-fi, discuss classic and modern pop culture, and share a creepy story or two. This podcast may scare you, it may horrify you, or it may leave you gravely amused. Listen to Gravely Amusing on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and wherever podcasts are found. Follow us on Twitter at Gravely_Amusing or on TikTok at Gravely Amusing.
Look up in the sky.